Welcome to episode 35 of I Thought I Knew How, a podcast about knitting and life and all sorts. I'm your host, Anne Frost, and this episode was recorded on June 10th, 2020. Today, I am going to touch on a few topics before sharing a bunch of knitting books that I have found to be very helpful in the Master Hand Knitter program, and I think will be helpful for all knitters, whether you're doing the program or not. We'll have some music and spend a nice half hour or so together while we knit or commute or spin or do some chore. Let's go ahead and get started. As always, I'd like to start the podcast with some thank yous to my new patrons, Lauren, Cheryl, and Woolly Tamales. Thank you for becoming patrons of the podcast. When I started this podcast, I was worried no one would listen, let alone step in to be part of the process by supporting its production. So thank you to all of my patrons. One of the benefits of becoming a patron at the ribbing level and higher is that we have a twice monthly online knit together on the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. All listeners are invited to the online knit group on the first Tuesday of the month. These are all from 4 to 7 p.m. Eastern time, so make sure that you mark your calendars and check the Facebook group I Thought I Knew How podcast or the Patreon feed at patreon.com/I Thought I Knew How to get the link. And thank you to EIW for leaving a kind comment when you rated the show, and to the handful of others who left starred reviews on iTunes in the last couple of weeks. If you are leaving reviews on iTunes and I'm not acknowledging them, it's likely because you're outside of the US. I can only see the comments left in the US store. But your ratings and comments wherever you are help make the show more visible in the search results. So that's a great way to help the show. And I especially love the comments because people tend to mention what they're doing when they listen to the show, and I'm always curious about that. As of this recording, there have been no updates on the BluPrint situation. As far as I know, they're still planning on shutting down and giving prorated refunds to subscribers and providing some way for those who bought lifetime access to classes to download the classes. I do record the show on Thursday and launch it on Monday evening, though, so that may have changed by the time that this comes out. I'm putting any information I find about any knitting news in the I Thought I Knew How Facebook group. So if you are on Facebook, make sure you're in the group and you'll hear the news as soon as I do. In the meantime, I've been binging as many of the lessons as is humanly possible. The problem with this has been that the first class I really wanted to take all the way through was the Shetland Hap class by Gudrun Johnston, and that required a lot of knitting between lesson segments. So while I was knitting on the Hap, which is the Shetland word for a shawl, it's just a great big square shawl, I watched a lot of the lessons that were more informative than practical. If you are in the same boat where you're trying to get in as many classes as possible but need to knit something else, I'll share some of the ones that I've been watching that I found to be very informative. This isn't all the ones I've watched. Some I watched on specific topics I already know quite a bit about to see if they'd fill in some gaps. And they were good classes, but I didn't necessarily learn a ton from them. This is my list of recommended ones that I think have information that will help most knitters. First of all, if you're a very, very beginner fiber crafter, I would send you to The Stitch Dimension by Christy Glass. It's a little silly, but it covers a little bit about a lot of things, and it may fill in some of the gaps in your knowledge, but really it's only going to be helpful to you if you are a very beginner. Similarly, Knit Meets Knot is a series with a knitter and a crocheter who are tasked with creating the same sort of project using their respective craft. If you are new to fiber crafting, you may enjoy that series. If you have been thinking about getting into teaching, How to Teach It is an incredibly valuable course. It's presented by Gwen Bortner, and she covers everything. How to develop a class, how to communicate expectations clearly with those who want to hire you, teaching agreements, classroom management, marketing, what to look for when you're picking a project if you decide to teach using a project-based method, how to break into teaching at festivals and larger events. Her information is so helpful, and be sure to go to the resources section of the lesson and download the information packet so you have it if BluPrint really does go away. Similarly, if you want to get into designing, How to Say It, Pattern Writing for Knitters by Edie Ekman will be a great help. I am not an editor of knitting patterns, but I am a copy editor in my day job, and her tips for editing your own patterns are spot on, especially her cheat sheet for creating your own style guide. A style guide is a list of decisions already made on questionable topics. So for instance, in my day job, when I take on a client, I ask them if they want me to edit according to the Chicago Manual of Style or the AP Style Guide, or if they have an in-house style guide of practices that they prefer. This matters because there are some issues that are not settled in our language, like the Oxford comma. I use it. I have one client who hates it, so I have to remember to not add it when I edit his work. Some people write titles like Mr. and Mrs. with a period at the end. Others just write MR and MRS. In the long run, these things don't matter as long as they're done consistently through the entire piece of work. Same thing when you're writing your patterns. Are you going to use abbreviations like BEG or beginning or ST instead of stitch? If you are writing a pattern for novice knitters, you may want to write everything out. If it's a more advanced pattern, you may opt to abbreviate it because advanced knitters want to get to the action. Again, it doesn't really matter, but you need to make the call and stick with it consistently. I really enjoyed this class. And again, if you have a membership, be sure to download the resources section for the class and get the information packet downloaded. If you are a crocheter, Save Our Stitches with Andy Smith is fantastic. If you've been crocheting for a while, you won't really need to sit through the whole class. You'll likely have figured out a lot of it through trial and error. But lesson 6 is fantastic. She covers how to cut out an error and crochet it, and it was game-changing. So make sure you at least watch that lesson. Finally, I did finish the Shetland Hap class, and I recommend it. If you don't think you'll wear the hap, knit it with a machine washable wool instead of the Shetland wool, and you'll have a baby Afghan for your own baby or someone in your life. She goes over the construction of a modern hap, which means you knit the center of the shawl first and then pick up the stitches around it. And it's really easy to do that because the increases and decreases they use on haps create a hole for you to pick up in. So it's really easy to see where to pick up. And then you knit the old Shawl pattern around the center, which is similar to a feather and fan, and then you work an implied border. There's also a pattern and instructions for a half hap version of the shawl, which is a triangle version, and the construction is slightly different, and she goes over all of that for you in the class as well. As I said, this is a modern version of the Shetland shawl. The hap is the style of shawl that was worn by the local women of Shetland. The square shawl was folded on the diagonal and then worn around the shoulders, and the ends could be tucked into your waistband. The one I knit is incredibly warm, but I'm not keeping it for myself because it's a little short. I'm very tall, and so it doesn't wrap quite as far as I want it to. I'm going to pass it on and work a bigger hat for myself because I really want one that's super big that I can throw on when I need to step outside for a bit in the winter and I don't want to bother with a proper coat. Right now, I'm watching through the Essential Guide to Finishing Hand Knits with Ann Hansen. This is one of those classes where she has one way to do it and it's either the same as what I'm already doing or it's another way to do something, and I'm not convinced that it's necessarily better than what I'm doing. So I haven't gotten a lot out of it yet. That said, some of the later classes are on attaching zippers and seaming, and I know I could use more work on those, so I'm going to stick it out. But that said, that class is going to go on hold because that is really a watch and learn class. And now that I'm finished with the hap class, which was my knit along class, I need to find another practical class. And once I get to a part of that course where I need to knit a lot before I can go on, I will go back to watching the Finishing Hand Knits class again. I'm not sure what I'm going to pick up next as a do-along lesson class. Maybe a brioche, maybe. I don't know. We are getting on and along, so I'm going to stop here and throw in a song for us and pick up on the other side. I have a song for you from Angela Easterling. Again, it's summer, and summer is the time when some country music tends to slip into my listening library. This is the countryest of country songs. It's called Arkansas Murder Ballad. She's been done wrong. She shoots the man who does her wrong. Let's not take this as a recommendation on how to live our lives, okay? But I quite like the song. It's a shame that chipper songs about sunshine and posies rarely sound this great. This is Arkansas Murder Ballad by Angela Easterling.
Dig a hole about 6 by 5 and make it deep. Not too wide, fresh blisters on my calloused hand. Back so weary, hard to stand. Soon the sun will rise up on that eastern sky. peaceful laying there. Reminds me when I used to care for a broken rib. Blackened eyes, 1,000 tears, 1,000 lies, and no time to wonder if anyone heard his cry. He that old north wind is howling low, and she seemed to say, hey girl, where you gonna go? I don't know. Drag me west to Arkansas, took me from my mom and pie. Talk so pretty, talk so sweet, talk me right above my feet. Oh Virginia, Virginia, I miss my home. Poison flower in my heart by hate and fear. He did start, I could've left, could've run, but I shot him with his daddy's gun. Oh Jesus, Lord have mercy on my soul. He that old north wind is howling low, and she seemed to say, hey girl, where you gonna go? I don't know. Dig a hole about 6 by 5, make it deep, not too wide. The child within me starts to stir. This ain't no kind world for her. Her mama's a killer, her daddy's an evil man. The warm dark earth welcomes me, chest is pounding, try to breathe. Sirens wail from down the road, that barrel on my temple cold. One look to the sky and steady my right hand. He that old north wind is howling low. Will I rise upon her or fall to death's below? I don't know, I don't know.
Thank you to everyone who was able to join in on the Morehouse Virtual Farm Day a few Saturdays ago. That was the first time I've been involved in a live event like that, and it was a lot of fun. Morehouse Farm is bucolic. The sheep are beautiful. The farm itself is rolling grassy hills and woods. We had to take some stuff out to one of the areas we'd be filming, and we saw deer on the way. The pond on the farm was full of geese and ducks and their babies. Albrecht has been keeping bees, and there were 2 hives that we passed by on the way back to the office, and the farm is so peaceful and soothing that we were all just standing 2 or 3 feet from the hives and thinking nothing of it. Even though the bees were thick in the air, we weren't bothering them, they didn't bother us. Through the course of the day, we had dyeing demonstrations and heard from Vanessa Knits about some of her current and future patterns, including the Calvin sweater, which is a top-down sweater with simple stripes that is going on as a knit-along right now on the Morehouse Merino Flock group on Facebook. We had Casey and Jan there to model some of the Morehouse projects. It was a really great time, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm guessing that most of you have heard already that Rhinebeck has been canceled for this year. It's very sad. I was really hoping that that would go forward. But now that the call has been made, I'm fairly sure that Erin will plan to repeat the virtual farm visit in the fall as well. So stay tuned for that. I'll keep you posted if and when it goes forward. In Master Hand Knitter news, I knit another swatch. Yay! But I have not had time to sit down and do the sheet for it, or answer the questions pertaining to all the increase swatches. That is the next step, and I hope to have that done before the next episode so I can report on it. This last increase swatch was for knitting lifted increases, which is when you knit into the stitch below the stitch you're going to increase in, as well as in the stitch itself. If you need it to lean right, you knit into the stitch below first and then knit the stitch. And if you need it to lean left, you knit the stitch first and then knit into the stitch below. Oftentimes, instructions on how to work the stitch from below will have you lift it and put it on the left needle and then knit it. But that can stretch the stitch and make the increase more obvious. If you can, it's best to just insert the needle into the stitch while it's still below without putting that stitch onto any needle and work the stitch there. Arenda Holiday has a great video demonstrating this, and I'll make sure to link it in the show notes for you so you can see what I'm talking about. To see the show notes, in some podcast apps, you can swipe left or right on the podcast image while you're listening to the show, and it will show you the show notes. If that doesn't work for you, just visit ithoughtIknewhow.familypodcasts.com and scroll down to the episode links and click through, and you'll see them there. All right, everyone, I have a new product to tell you about today. It takes time for me to bring in new affiliates because I like to try them out myself first and make sure that they are something I love before I tell you about them. That's why you hear about Drops and Ashcroft Makers so much, because in the background, I'm trying products and deciding I don't like them. And so I'm not bringing them on to you, but I think this one is great. Allbirds is a sustainable shoe company that allows us to tread lighter together. They use sustainable materials for their shoes like eucalyptus trees, sugarcane, and merino wool, as well as recycled plastic and nylon where it's needed so that they aren't adding to the amount of plastic in the environment. That's all well and good though. How are the shoes? They have several varieties, first of all. The one I was first made aware of were their wool runners, which have a merino wool upper and a sugarcane and castor bean oil sole. My daughter was actually the first to buy them. She wanted them because they're machine washable, and they really are. She's washed them several times now, and they aren't showing any signs of damage. So I knew I wanted to give them a try. My pair arrived the other day, and I put them on barefoot because that's one of their selling points, is that they're so soft inside you can wear them without socks. That is, my friends, so very true. My feet were surrounded in a cocoon of merino on the inside of the shoe. The sole is soft and bouncy. It's like wearing slippers, but they are safe, grippy shoes that you can wear anywhere you would wear a casual sneaker. All of that, and they are $20 less than what I pay for my plastic and nylon made normal sneaker that will never biodegrade. When I finally finish with these shoes, the only bits of them that won't biodegrade are the laces, which are made from recycled water bottles. If you'd like to check them out, visit tinyurl.com/allbirdsshoes and learn more about the materials they use and the other styles that are available. I wouldn't run in the wool runners, ironically, but they do have more technical running shoes available, as well as slip-on shoes and other styles. Check them out at tinyurl.com/allbirdsshoes. And if you decide to buy, you'll be helping out with the running of the show. tinyurl.com/allbirdsshoes. I'm in a very sherry recommendation giving mood this week in general, so I thought I'd embrace it and share with you the 3 books that I have been using the most as I work through level 1 of the Master Hand Knitter program. I have 7 or 8 that I'm drawing from regularly, but these are the 3 that are the ones I turn to first because the chances are good that I will find what I need in them. I will put the links to all of these in the show notes for you, so don't feel like you have to rush for a pen or stop what you're doing. Just check the notes later and you can click through to find them. The first is a book that I think all knitters should have. It's the closest thing we have, I think, to a true encyclopedia of knitting. It's called The Principles of Knitting by June Hemmons Hiatt. There are 650 pages of knitting information in this book. She covers the methods of holding the yarn and producing a stitch, all the way through to the ways you can actually construct the fabric and project, including different types of increases and decreases and stitch patterns, through to finishing an item and the proper care. When it makes sense to, she'll mention a bit about the history and origins of a technique, but it's really about how to do knitting. At the back of the book is a glossary of terms, followed by an extensive bibliography, which is hugely helpful in finding secondary sources, and I think will get even more helpful as I move through the program and need to research more specialized topics in depth. Finally, there is a really thorough index. In fact, when I need to look something up to use as a source for the program, I don't go to the table of contents. It's much faster to just go to the index, find exactly what I'm looking for, and go to that page. The book is expensive, I'm not going to lie. As I'm recording this, the price on Amazon for the second edition is $56.28, and the Kindle edition is even $45. There are first editions still in stock for just under $40, but I would really recommend that you go for the second edition, as she did do a pretty thorough overhaul before it was re-released. There are used second editions available today for under $30 if you don't mind buying secondhand. Of all the books I'm recommending today, this really is the one I'd point you to if you're only going to get one of them. The second book I really like is the Reader's Digest Knitter's Handbook by Montse Stanley. And I think that's how you say, I think it's Montse. I do apologize if I'm saying that wrong. The reason why I like this book so much is that, true to form for Reader's Digest books, it is succinct. What The Principles of Knitting does in over 700 pages, the Knitter's Handbook does in fewer than 320. You're not going to get any background information in this book. It's purely a how-to, and it covers a lot. Dorset buttons even make an appearance, though they aren't called that. The author just gives a brief explanation of how to make one with a line drawing, and that's it. Every now and then there are color photos of finished items and historical pieces with a bit of explanation, but it does not delve at all. I love this book because it does cover so much in so few words. You have to provide 2 sources for everything in the Master Knitter program. Everything. So while The Principles of Knitting is preferable, I think, because it gives more thorough explanations, the Reader's Digest Knitter's Handbook is invaluable because 9 times out of 10, I can quickly and easily find the information I need to be my second source and move on without having to read through more lengthy explanations. The book was first published in 1993 and then again in 1999, and as far as I can tell, they are the same edition, though if you're worried about that, opt for the one from 1999. They only have used copies available on Amazon, but at the moment, there are lots available for less than $10 with the shipping included. The third book I wanted to recommend is not one that I cite very often, but it's a very handy book nonetheless. It's Knitting in Plain English by Maggie Righetti. I like this book because it's extremely conversational and thorough in its explanations. Righetti covers all the whys behind the way things are done in knitting. I'm going to read an excerpt for you so you can see what I mean. So this is from page 75 of the book, from the section called 2 Needle Knitting and Purling On. So that's when you are casting on using 2 needles. She says, "There's yet another way to cast on that first row of loops, and of course I'm going to explain how to do it, but I don't use it very often. Knitting or purling on with 2 needles is a very effective way of beginning with a tight and inflexible cast-on row. I'm not the only knitting instructor who has had to rip out such beginnings from customers' completed garments because they were so tight that they acted like a tourniquet and shut off the body's blood flow. Knitting or purling on with 2 needles is not advised for the bottom hip line casting on for sweaters. It may make wrist cuffs too tight for human hands. You may want to learn to do it, however, because it is ideal for the cast-on row of a buttonhole. It will not stretch, give, or bulge out of shape. It is a rigid cast-on, and it has a sort of beaded appearance." And then she goes on to explain how you actually work the bind-on. So you can see in this bit, she covers the pitfalls of the knitted cast-on as well as an application where it makes sense. She lets you know what it will look like when it's done, and she gives her opinion on it. This book is very much like learning to knit from a friend. If you are looking for a quick answer, it can be a little wordy. And like I said, I rarely use this as a citation in my master knitter work, but I love it as a personal reference, especially for the added information about when certain techniques are best employed. There's also a sweater design in plain English and crocheting in plain English by the same author. Right now, the new copies of Knitting in Plain English are about $15 on Amazon, or about half that with the shipping costs included for used copies. Let's have another song before we move towards saying goodbye for the day. Another couple of genres that tend to slip into my playlists when the days are longer are dance music and funk. If you are listening while you walk, you may find yourself picking up the pace with this one. Spinners, adjust your pedaling speed at your own risk. This is Otto Koberg with Catch the Fire. A few more things before I go. You know I love Shetland knitting traditions and I love working with Shetland wool, so I'm going to let you know about an open knit-along that Jamieson and Smith are running on their Ravelry group called Jamieson and Smith Lovers. If you go to the group, you'll find a thread called Keep Making KAL 2020. You can work any fibercraft project to be part of the event as long as it's entirely made with Jamieson and Smith wool. It will run until the 22nd of September 2020. There is another thread for finished objects. Post there when you are done and you will receive a pattern from JNS at the end of the event. And one maker will be chosen by random number generator as the winner. They haven't defined what the prize is yet, but I'm sure it will be lovely. I've seen some of their past prizes and they've been very generous. So know that that is out there. Also, I wanted to let you know that Merrily by Design has released another charity pattern. This one is called Chris and Jet Walk the UK. The hat has a very interesting 3-color band and features a paw print on the side and a gorgeous compass-inspired crown. Chris Lewis and his dog Jet are walking the entire UK coastline to raise funds for the SSAFA, which stands for Soldiers, Sailors, Airmen, and Family Association, which provides support for veterans from the British Armed Forces and their families or dependents. I'll add links to the charity and some of the news articles about Chris and Jet in the show notes. Merrily designed the pattern to help with the fundraising, and all the proceeds from the sale of the pattern will be donated to the SSAFA in Chris's name. Take a look by searching for Chris and Jet Walk the UK on Ravelry, or follow Merrily by Design on Instagram, or look for a link to the pattern in the show notes. It's a really cleverly designed hat that I think would work well for anyone, but especially for the men in your life who can be so tricky to knit for sometimes. Thank you for listening and knitting with me for a bit. If you'd like to support the show, please visit patreon.com/I-thought-I-knew-how to make a monthly pledge, or visit ko-fi.com, that's ko-fi.com/I-thought-I-knew-how to make a one-time donation to the podcast. You may also consider making a purchase from one of our sponsors on the website I-thought-I-knew-how.familypodcasts.com, where you can find the show notes for each episode, or you can help out by leaving a 5-star review and kind comments wherever you listen to this podcast, and tell your friends. Be sure to check out tinyurl.com/allbirdsshoes for comfortable, sustainable, machine washable shoes. And if you decide to buy, you'll be helping out the show that way too. Find me on my social media accounts as I Thought I Knew How, except on Twitter, where it's just Thought I Knew How. The groups on Ravelry and Facebook are both called I Thought I Knew How Podcast. Until next time, may you be blessed with stitches that never drop, yarn without joins, and plenty of time to knit.